Hey, how's it going? Josh here from Tek With Josh, and this is episode number 9 of Tek With Josh. This episode is titled USB-C. What is USB-C? Well, USB is an acronym for Universal Serial Bus, and the C stands for the form factor. Now you're asking yourself, if C is the form factor, what's A or B? Well, I have you. USB-A is the flat, normal USB connector you see on the back of your computer, or the side if you have a laptop, or if you have an older charging brick. And now you're asking yourself, then what is B? I've never seen another USB port. Well, it's a peripheral connection for things like hubs, monitors, things like that. And back in the day when I worked in Circuit City, we called it the printer cable for USB-B because that's the connection for a printer. It's the thicker USB that looks like a house shape. So now, let me blow your mind even more. You remember your older phones before USB-C or Lightning? If you had an Android, flip phone, whatever, you had something called mini USB, which was like a square kind of thing, but it kind of had little slide, things like that. That's mini USB-B. And then for the flat charger for your Samsung Galaxy 3, 4, or even 2 and 5, 6 before they went to C, even 7, was a micro USB-B port. It's a bit confusing, right? So USB-C is the new standard. By the way, new is in quotes because it's just a form factor here. And guess what? Not all USB-C cables are the same. The EU, European Union, whatever you want to call it, is imposing certain laws on Apple and rulings that Apple has to have USB-Cs on all their products that are releasing in 2023. So there's speculation that the new iPhone will have USB-C. But is it a good thing? So let me tell you about my history with USB-C. My first product that I've ever purchased that had USB-C was my Nexus 6P, which came out in 2015, which is the same year Apple released the all-new MacBook. And it had one port on it other than the headphone jack, and there was one USB-C port. Hey, why did Apple just put one port other than the headphone jack on the laptop? Well, because this USB-C standard allows for video transfer, data transfer, and power delivery. So it's a great thing, right? Well, it depends. Because, sure, USB-C is very versatile. In this case, you can get a little hub. Then you have your USB-A ports, HDMI, micro SD, regular full-size SD, Ethernet. All these ports with one little dongle adapter. But guess what? It's not the same. And let me tell you why. I have a MacBook Pro. And in this MacBook Pro, it has an 87-watt USB-C charger. And I plug in C-to-C cable, plug in my laptop, and charge my laptop. And I have an iPad that I charge off that, but I also have a Valve Steam Deck. And when I plug it into the same charger, 87 watts, you know what it tells me? Slow charging. Hey, does that mean my Steam Deck takes over 87 watts? No, my Steam Deck charges only 45 watts. And it's because of a standard cord power delivery. So with your phone, if you have an Android phone, you have something called Quick Charger if you have a Qualcomm processor that gives it more power through the USB port. Apple has fast charging power delivery with USB-C standard chargers that are offered, and power delivery just allows more wattage and amperage through the port. And my MacBook Pro charger doesn't offer that. So the Steam Deck, even though they're both the same connection, and I'm putting out almost double what my Steam Deck charger can do, the Steam Deck can't accept it because it's a different USB-C standard. But other than this power delivery, there's also USB 2.0, 3.0, and 3.1 or 3.2. So USB 3, Gen 1, and Gen 2 to make it simpler. What is this? Well, this is basically the maximum speed of said USB throughput. USB 2.0 maximum throughput is 480 megabits per second. USB 3 Gen 1 can hit 5 gigabits per second. A gigabit is 1024 megabits. Then USB 3.0 Gen 2 or 3.1, whatever you want to call it, 3.2, because standards change all the time in the USB in this interface, can support 10 gigabits per second throughput. And also, if you have a charger with power delivery, things like that, you can only get up to 100 watts using Gen 2. USB 3.0 Gen 2, 3.2, like I said earlier. So you had to have a specific cable. My coworker, a couple weeks back, because we have work laptops now, he went to buy a USB-C cable. He went to Walgreens, got a cable, like $20. I told him go on Amazon, it's cheaper. He said no, he needed it now. And it didn't work because it wasn't the right USB-C type cable. Because not all cables are the same. Because like I said, they all had the same connection, but what they're rated for is different. And having the wrong cable or cheap cable can cause a fire because it's electrical. And speaking about USB-C, on the work laptop, I need a hub because they offer the monitor to take home with a hub built in. But I don't need a monitor. I have multiple monitors already. So I purchased a $27 hub. It has two USB-A's, a USB-C with power delivery pass-through. So I could charge the laptop through it, one HDMI. Oh, sorry, three USB-A's, the HDMI, the USB-C power delivery pass-through, and a RJ45 Ethernet port. So I have a keyboard, a mouse, a monitor, the Ethernet cable hooked up, and also a headset hooked up through the one hub. And the problem is that I didn't have enough bandwidth. So it literally would cut out. For VPN, I would lose connection. Even for a split second, I would lose VPN access. Or the headset would stop working randomly. And it wasn't the best thing because by losing that, I would have to unplug everything, plug it back in. It just created a hassle. But I also have a Thunderbolt 3 dock. So retail these docks for Thunderbolt can go for $200, $300. What's Thunderbolt? I'll tell you that in a second, but hear me out. So a Thunderbolt 3 dock, which retail goes for $200, which uses the same connector, I had zero issues plugging it in. And also when I had the USB-C dock or hub plugged in, it would tell me I'm slow charging even though I'm using the included power adapter in there. It will give me a notice, slow charging or not enough wattage. So Thunderbolt is an Intel standard that they made in conjunction with Apple. So with the Generation 3, Thunderbolt 3, and Thunderbolt 4, they use the USB-C standard. But their peripherals can only work on the Thunderbolt port, and they're a lot of money. So on the Thunderbolt 3 or 4 cable from Apple will be roughly 100 to 140 depending on how many feet you need. And yes, $100 to $140 for just a cable. You can buy third-party cable for about $40, but compared to a USB-C cable, which is about $9, that's a big difference. And it can only be a certain length because after that, it doesn't work. The hubs, like I said, 200 plus. So what's the difference? Well, even though it uses the same connection, it can supply up to 40 gigabytes throughput. So like I said, USB 3.0 Gen 2 can hit up to 10 gigabits. So with this, you can get up to 40 gigabits. And you can connect the external graphics card, eGPU, things like that. You could daisy chain. So my RAID setup for my hard drives is Thunderbolt. And I can connect other Thunderbolt peripherals through there because it's like Firewire. You have a solid speed, it doesn't really dip. And you can hook up multiple devices through there, up to I think 7 or 8. But it's still the same standard, same connector, but it makes it harder to know what you're buying. So when you buy like a new Mac, you try to connect it to another one, they tell you can plug it in device to device, but you need a Thunderbolt cable. You try the cable that comes with the power adapter, try hooked up between two Macs, it doesn't work because it's not the right cable. Even though it fits, it's not the same cable. And that's the problem. That we keep having one standard, and guess what? there's something called USB 4 right now. That's is basically as fast as Thunderbolt, up to 40 gigabits, but it's USB standard. And you're like, it's the same speed. Why is there a difference? Because there is, honestly. There's a union behind this that comes up with the name and things like that. It doesn't offer the same power delivery, external monitor supports. I could go into more details for it, but for this argument, it doesn't really matter because Thunderbolt, even though it uses the same connection, it's not the same thing because of what it can do for the pro users. Whereas USB-C, we think of it, we see it on the MacBook, it's right there on any Mac laptop since 2016 for the MacBook Pro line. And even Apple with their phones ship out a Lightning to USB-C because it's a standard. But the problem is, with the new sanctions, Apple couldn't and might and probably will, not might, they probably will stick a USB-C port to the new phones. But guess what? It doesn't tell you what speed it will be because it could be a USB 2.0 USB-C port. And the problem is, right now, our phones are USB 2.0s already with the Lightning. And that creates a problem that most pro users or average consumers face because you can record 4K ProRes HDR video footage, which is great. And I have a 512 gig iPhone phone when I want to do that. The problem is transferring the files off. USB 2.0, like I said, is 480 megabits per second. That's maximum. That's not megabytes, that's megabits, so it's less than megabytes. But it fluctuates. That's always been the problem with USB standard since the 1.0 port was introduced. It fluctuates based on the bus speed and what you're doing. And it takes forever, which is why AirDrop is a big thing. But if you're forcing Apple to change their whole platform over to C, that doesn't guarantee they're going to put the most expensive ports in there. I'm not saying that for the Pro model or the Pro Max, but for the average consumer phone. So like the 14, or technically the 15 or the 15 mini, if they bring that back, or the 15 Max, it might not have a 3.0 or 3.0 Gen 2 port or USB 4.0 USB-C port. It might have a USB 2.0 because the average consumer just needs to charge their phones. Whereas my iPad Pro has a Thunderbolt port in it for the faster transfer rates. Whereas the Air lineup does not, or the regular entry-level iPad does not, because it's just USB-C, because the average consumer doesn't need that much speed. Because USB-C, you can plug in an external drive and get 400, 500 megabytes on the external SSD, whereas the prosumers or the pro customers will plug in a Thunderbolt SSD. Like I said, I have a RAID set up, and if I need access to anything on there, Thunderbolt's the quickest way. If you have a Thunderbolt external PCI SSD, you're going to get 2 gigabits read and write. So for things like that, or to plug in a multi-gig network card, external NIC network expansion card, you have a multi-gig port there, 10 gig. You have 2.5 gig LAN RAN, so you'll be able to access your server, do video edits, things like that. So for that, you need Thunderbolt or USB 3 Gen 2 for those speeds to be able to read and write. But when you have USB-C so convoluted with all of these cheaper cables, cheaper docks that aren't rated the same way, there's no way to really control what you're buying at your mom and pop, Best Buy, things like that, because you don't know if it's the right cable, because you're just looking at the connection. Hey, it's USB-C, my phone's USB-C, let me get this. Don't get me started on Android phones with warp charging with like the OnePlus series, things like that. The new Xiaomi phones that can charge up to 120 watts in 10 minutes, like full. That's just USB-C. It's just a standard, and it's not the same from manufacturer to manufacturer, and that's where the problem lies. And that's really it for this episode of Tek With Josh. Thank you guys for making it to the end. If you enjoyed it and want to hear more content from me, feel free to listen to older episodes or listen to books by Josh. Audio immersion is by me. Of course, I'm Josh. And subscribe, and stay tuned for the next one. See ya.